episode 137. I'm Ket. It's just me today, hanging out in the kitchen. So if you hear my refrigerator kick on or my dogs, messing around in the background or something like that, that's what's going on. We're keeping it casual today. But got a lot to catch up on. Update 44. It's been around on PC for like a month now. And, a lot of mixed feelings, a lot of opinions out there. I was planning to record an episode much earlier than this, but I don't know. I was having a hard time kind of landing on conclusions about things, and I was like, I just want to play some more BGs to keep gathering data, keep kind of getting a sense of how things are playing out. MMR was a factor at first, I think, where MMR was reset, so the games were just kind of wild. But anyway, right up at the very top, I want to just kind of get this out here that yeah, I'm going to have some criticism. Okay, there's some things that I'm not super stoked about on this update, but also yes, I have been having fun at the same time. And both things can be true. Both things are true. I'm still queuing up playing Battlegrounds every single day. Have some good matches, have some bad matches, just like before. You know, so keep that in mind. I may have a bit more criticism than positive things to say, but I think a lot of the things that I am not happy about will hopefully maybe be addressed over time and maybe won't be a problem eventually. Another thing before we get into things, I want to recommend going to twitch.tv/Bethesda. And sorry if you hear my dogs barking in the background. Go to twitch.tv/Bethesda. I don't know if it's their most recent live stream or it's a very recent one called Battlegrounds Brawl, I believe. And it was a recent live stream, so you can go back and watch the video of it. And it features lead combat developer Brian Wheeler, and it's him and a couple of other streamers, and they're grouped up and playing Battlegrounds. And you can see the lead combat developer, you know, playing some PvP and get his perspective on things. You can see how he plays. You can see what his build is. Um, he's sharing a lot of thoughts as he's playing the games and encountering different scenarios. You kind of get a sense of where his mind is at, and maybe you can extrapolate um, how his team approaches the game and things like that. The kind of player that they have in mind, perhaps when they're making certain decisions. I found it to be a very illuminating thing to watch. I'm not gonna weigh in on my opinion one way or the other. Maybe you can infer from my tone, perhaps, how I feel about it. A lot of people in our Discord, we've been sharing opinions about it. It was really the first glimpse I think maybe we've ever gotten of an actual developer, and not just any developer, the lead combat, the lead of the combat team playing PvP. And so I feel like you can just infer so much from that, from that video. So many things: the build that he's using, the way he's playing, the thoughts that he's sharing as he's playing, all that kind of stuff. I think it sheds a lot of light on a lot of the decisions that have been made, balance wise, over the last several years. So yeah, twitch.tv/Bethesda. Look for the video called Battlegrounds Brawl. It's a recent one, like a week old. I liked the three-team system better than the two-team system. I've been trying to give this new situation a chance to let it win me over, and obviously I'm probably going to be biased because I've had so much time with the three-team system. My mind is kind of wired that way to just sort of think of Battlegrounds in that way. So that's why I've been waiting like a month before making a recording, because I really want to make sure I have uh, a really well-formed opinion with lots of experience and all of that. And yeah, I think I really can just finally draw the conclusion that I prefer the old system. I really do prefer the three-team system, because what we run into with two teams, especially in the 4v4s, is that there's pretty much always a stronger team and a weaker team. Very rarely, almost never, do you have two teams that are just evenly matched. One team is going to be at least a little bit better than the other, and that usually gets established within like the first 60 seconds or less. And then from that point forward, the weaker team is just pinned against the wall, and we're just watching it play out. We already know what the outcome's going to be, but now we still have 14 minutes to just, go through the motions basically. And, you know, sometimes it's a slight imbalance oftentimes it's a major imbalance where it's just wipe after wipe after wipe to the point where, people on the weaker team just stop dropping out of spawn. They'll just stand up there and just say, I'm not subjecting myself to that. No way. And so now we're all just kind of standing around, don't even know really what to do. Whereas with a three-team situation, there's enough chaos. There's always that third party to come in and mix things up. If there's one team that's kind of straight up getting farmed, they can kind of utilize that third team to get themselves out of that situation in one way or another. It allows for a lot more, kind of smart gameplay moments like that where you don't necessarily have to have the best build, the best team comp. You can sort of outsmart the other teams and get away with a lot of stuff. Kill stealing is no longer a thing at all. So a lot of old strategies just don't work anymore. Definitely some good things about that, but there may be some downsides to that as well. But I think that's the biggest downside to the two-team system is there's almost always a weaker team, that usually gets established very early on, and then for the majority of the match, that team just has their back against the wall, just kinda getting farmed until the end. And especially if you're unlucky enough to get a match that has the finite lives thing going on where you can run out of lives and it just won't let you respawn anymore. I do not understand the value of that, because if people on your team are running out of lives, that must mean that you're already the weaker team. So now you're taking a player off the map, you're even weaker, and then someone else is going to run out of lives. It's just going to snowball. You have absolutely no chance from that point forward. So it's really just punishing the weaker team for being the weaker team and making them even weaker. I don't get the value of that. I could see if the finite lives applied to the team as a whole. Like if your team as a whole dies 6 or 7, however many times, then the round ends, the other team wins the round and the next round starts. That at least would be better. I don't even see a lot of value in that as opposed to just the regular, no rounds, just the first team to get this many kills wins. I think I just prefer that, it's just simple. But if we're gonna do the rounds thing, I think we need to get rid of the individual players running out of lives. It needs to be your team as a whole that runs out of lives. That'll be way better. Now, we'll say that issue of there just being kind of one dominant team that just farms the other team the whole time, that seems to be mostly an issue in solo 4v4s. That seems to be the main place where that's a real problem. And if you remember at the beginning of PTS, that was not a queue that existed. Um, there was just group 4v4 and group 8v8. There was no solo queue at all, and you could just you could queue as a solo into those queues. Just that's kind of how the original queue system was. In the group 4v4s, I feel like, okay, you know what you're getting into there. You need to have your squad ready. That's the competitive mode. You're expecting to run into other groups that are optimized and ready to go at it. You're testing your group against this other group. There, it's fine. I think that's a good environment and everything's fine there. It's really the solo 4v4 where you don't know who your teammates are gonna be. You don't know who your enemies are gonna be. You can only optimize so much. You can only prepare for so many possibilities, and it's not like with the three-team system, it's not nearly as easy to be just a solo hero in a solo 4v4 scenario, because it's just this one other team coming straight at you the entire time. So it's a lot harder to disengage and you don't have this other team to kind of to break things up and stuff like that. So that's really the main queue that I have a problem with is the solo 4v4. The group 4v4 is fine. I really have a lot of fun in the solo 8v8s. Group 8v8s are a lot of fun, especially for like a duo. Like if we do duos night with the guild, the 8v8 queue is super duper fun for that. I definitely recommend if you're on PC using the Better Scoreboard add-on, or if you just use the controller UI, you can queue for multiple queues at a time. So I usually just queue for everything all at once. I'll either queue for all four queues, or I'll just do 4v4 and 8v8 solos, depending on my mood. The 8v8s are fun. They are more similar to the old three-team situation because, you basically have 2 teams worth of enemies, kind of a similar number of enemies. Actually, the exact same number of enemies, right? In the old three-team system, you had 2 teams of 4 that were your enemies, so that's 8 enemies. So now this is 8v8, you still have 8 enemies, but a lot more allies in this case. But I miss that old enemy of my enemy dynamic where this could be your temporary ally and then we're going to go at it once this little situation's over. That's no more. There's just two teams. So it's just which one's better. The problem that I was talking about with in solo 4v4s where like there's one dominant team and the other team's just getting farmed, that that can happen in 8v8s. That definitely does happen and sometimes it can be even magnified because of there's just so much more players. But to me, it doesn't seem to be as much of a problem because there are so many more players. There also is not a they don't do the finite lives thing in 8v8s. So even if your team is getting farmed, it's like you have so many teammates, like somebody is respawning kind of all the time. So there's almost always like some allies around, some kind of meat shields that you can take advantage of. And it just seems like those matches are chaotic enough that if you're kind of a wily enough sort of player or ratty enough sort of player, like a Nightblade or a Sork, something like that. Um, you can still make some stuff happen even if you do find yourself on that weaker team. But the 4v4s, there's nowhere to hide. There's only three other allies you have to count on. Those maps are so much smaller. It's a much different situation there. So I definitely have more fun in 8v8s most of the time. Honestly, in the group 4v4 in the true competitive mode, we haven't had a lot of opportunities to really check that out. Anytime me and my friends group up and queue up in there, we mostly run into casuals. We've run into some serious squads a couple of times just by chance, but most of the time that's not the case. So I don't know. I was kind of thinking the new battlegrounds, especially with this new, quote unquote competitive mode, that some teams would kind of come out of the woodwork, but it hasn't really seemed to happen so far. I think a lot of that is due to this really buggy launch of this whole thing, with um, this bug with lobbies not filling and the game never starting and you just getting kicked out. You have to wait that 5 minutes or suffer a penalty if you want to bail early. That was happening a lot at first. They hot fixed it, but it didn't all the way fix it. It still happens a fair amount. They hot fixed it again, but it's still not all the way fixed. So we're still waiting on this thing to actually work properly. I seriously think a lot of people are just getting turned off by that, because just kind of getting used to something new for a lot of people, that's already going to be some friction there. At the very least, if it can work properly, we can we can have a much better chance of at least giving it a chance, and seeing what it's all about. But, it's so frustrating from the get-go before you've even managed to get into a game that by the time you do get in there, you're just in such a negative mindset. You're just ready to pick the whole thing apart, and I think that's what's been going on. I think amongst the PvP community, people are just not impressed with this thing. They don't like it. It doesn't seem to be necessarily unanimous. I've seen some people say that they really like this situation and it seems good, but I think definitely the majority, at least for the Stoons Goons, our guild, most people seem to think this was a pretty big whiff in a lot of ways. I think the potential's still there. We can give it some time. They can make some pretty minor tweaks and fix a lot of this stuff. I mean, getting the queue situation and the timeouts and all those kind of buggy situations, I think getting that stuff worked out, it's only a matter of time. I'm not even really worried about that. That'll get fixed eventually, I'm certain. It's the design choices of the queues and the finite lives and a few other things. Like I seriously think we just needed to delete the solo 4v4 queue. Just needs to not exist. And maybe just go back to the original. We just have a 4v4 and an 8v8 queue. You can queue solo or duo or as a four squad or whatever. I think that was the best way. I know not everyone agrees, but I don't know. That's how it used to be for the longest time, and it seemed to work fine to me at the time. It does seem like one very positive thing about this two-team situation is there's much less of a divide between objective-minded players and deathmatch-minded players. Because it's just two teams. If you are a deathmatch, motivated kind of person, most likely whoever you're killing is standing on a flag or they're going for a flag or something like that. It's much less clear that there is that divide because it just seems like it looks like you're working together either way in a lot of cases, I think. So I see a lot less of the negativity and the people, yelling at each other for not focusing the objective or whatever. I have not been seeing nearly as much of that. That's good. Sorry if you were hearing my dog lapping water in the background. She was thirsty. Anyway, going forward, I'm just gonna be keep playing ESO, keep queuing up for BGs every day, like I still have been. I think when this patch first dropped, I was really not into it, especially because of the bugs. I think I was having a really hard time getting over that hump because, you know, 50% of the time the match just wouldn't start at all. So by the time I did get into a match, I'm already frustrated. I'm kind of over that hump now, and I'm just trying to give the situation a chance for what it is. I'm still having good matches. I'm still having a good time. I think over time, the pain points will get resolved one way or another. Whether it's development decisions that get made, or just me getting over it, or or whatever. The best classes to me for Battlegrounds seems to be Arcanist and Nightblade. Those are the 2 that I'm most consistently getting very, very good results with, and I pretty consistently see other people doing well with those as well. I see a pretty wide assortment of different classes. Like everything except Necro is pretty well represented in most cases. It seems like sorcerers are maybe less effective than they used to be because they benefited a lot from having that third party option and being able to steal kills and that sort of stuff. So now that there's just 2 teams, I feel like sorcerers they're being pressured more directly a lot more often. So they just don't have that capability of engaging and disengaging the way they do when there's 2 other teams to get into the mix. So I feel like their effectiveness and just being able to look at the scoreboard and see a whole bunch of kills, that's it's not as easy to do as it used to be for sorcerers. Ranged builds in general, especially in 8v8s, I feel like range builds are the way to go. It's so hard as a melee player to jump into the middle of a brawl where there are 8 enemies targeting you, and if you're the only one jumping up in there, then all of them are pretty much just targeting you while all of your ranged allies are hanging back from a safe distance and all of that. So it can be tough to play melee as a damage focused build in the 8v8s. So if you're doing 8v8, I really recommend doing ranged or just be prepared to take a lot of heat. But in general, Templars, I think, as always, Templars are very kind of middle of the road. I see a fair number of them. They're just generally effective in a lot of different ways. They got support, they have kill securing capabilities, they have pretty good offense in general. I see a pretty good number of Templars, and I think just like always, Templars kind of have like I said, they're like in the middle of the kind of the lineup as far as how they generally perform. They do pretty well most of the time in all the quadrants, so to speak. Dragon Knights, I feel like, have benefited quite a bit from this patch. I think especially in 8v8s because there's pretty much guaranteed to be a pretty good amount of cross healing and group support in a group like that. And Dragon Knight kind of disproportionately benefits from having group support. So just the fact that they have a lot of other body blocks and a lot of cross heals and a lot of that kind of stuff to benefit from, they kind of become super powered in a lot of cases. And I just generally see DKs having an easier time. They really struggle in the 3 team situation because they don't have a really great answer to like third party situations or stuff like that, or like repositioning quickly and stuff like that is kind of difficult for a typical DK. Whereas with just one other team to worry about, positioning and that kind of stuff isn't nearly as much of a factor. It still can be, but not nearly as much. The DKs, I think this this patch in general kind of results in a buff for DK and battlegrounds. Kind of my opinion. Already talked about Sork a little bit. The fact that there is no third team, I think, hurts sorcerers quite a bit because they can't really create nearly as much chaos. It's a lot more difficult for them to disengage and distract their enemies the way they used to. Plus, no more stealing kills, which was a major, major thing that Sorks bring to a team. So, because there's no one to steal a kill from. It's just one other team. Warden still OP, still a hard carry. You're definitely always happy to see a Warden on your team, just because No matter what, they're going to be providing a pretty good amount of support. They can provide a ton of AoE pressure at the same time, giving you a bunch of really great buffs. They're helping you keep your armor buff active. You know, nobody's mad to have a warden on the team, and necros still seem to be pretty bottom of the totem pole. I really don't see them very often, and when I do see them, I don't know. They're not really doing anything of note, I don't think, you know. I was seeing a few bombers at the beginning, a few necro bombers doing okay, but I really think Nightblades and Arcanists bomb better, so I think the even those have kind of fizzled out by now. I'm not sure how much my mic is picking up, but the neighborhood dogs are just going wild today. So anyway, I guess that's what I have to say about the patch. I prefer the old system. If I could snap my fingers and take us back to the old three-team system, I would. I wish they had spent this development time on creating these new maps for the three-team system that we had, maybe tweaking some of the objective modes and just generally putting that energy into the existing system that we already had. I think it would have been way better to go that direction. But there are things that I like about this. There are positive things about it, and it's still, it's still ESO. It's still this combat system. It's still instant arena style, small to medium scale PvP that you can get in and out of really, really quickly, which is really what's great about Battlegrounds to begin with. So I'm going to keep playing. I'll either get over the things that I'm unhappy about with this patch, or they'll get addressed over time and maybe won't be as much of an issue. Hopefully, we'll see. One other thing I wanted to bring up in this episode is, you know, I'm 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 wondering if I should still call myself a Templar main because I've been kind of keeping an eye on myself for a little while now. Like, how often do I really play Templar these days? And man, I really just don't find myself picking up the Templar all that much these days. And you know, I wonder if I even really have a main, because I'm constantly just bouncing around to different classes all the time. Honestly, lately, for the past few months, if I had to, just based on the class that I'm playing with the most and getting the most success with, I would have to call myself a Nightblade main. Been playing a ton with Catface. My Nightblade, he shreds every single time. It's exquisite build, if I do say so myself. And that was my original character, first character that I created. My first two characters were Nightblades. It's obviously a power fantasy that I really like and all that kind of stuff. I think early on in PvP, that invisibility is such a crutch that coming into PvP as a Nightblade, it can actually be difficult because you're really not forced to learn to play without that crutch. And so a lot of fundamentals of PvP, as soon as you come across someone who stealth isn't effective against, you don't really have the experience to really know how to handle that situation. So that's why when I picked up the Templar and started doing PvP with that, a lot of things started clicking because you don't have that easy out button, so you're forced to think your way through situations and stuff like that. So definitely benefited a lot from that, and then the rest is history. I've played all the different classes. I have a whole podcast now and everything. So I take all that experience, all those fundamentals and everything, and now go back to playing a Nightblade, and man, it's a blast. It's a real blast. So I don't know if I really should say that I have a main or not. Honestly, if I had to pick one, I might say I might just go back to saying I'm a Nightblade main these days. I really don't play Templar all that much, although, obviously I've been calling myself a Templar main for a long time, so I clearly have a lot of experience with the class and enjoy it a fair amount. Maybe the class just needs to be buffed a little bit, because they really are what a jack of all trades, master of none, and I really when we're squatting up or when I'm choosing a character to bring something to the table, I really want someone that is a master of a trade of some kind most of the time. So I don't know. I just kind of wanted to monologue about that for a minute. Emails, our email address is scrollandpodcast@gmail.com. No emails to read this time, but if you'd like to send us some, that is the email address. Any topic is fine. You can be about ESO or anything else. You can say hello, make any suggestions for the show, ask a question, shout out to a friend, whatever you want. Scrollandpodcast@gmail.com. If you'd like to support the show, for now, I've done away with monetization. So that's, you can't give me money anymore. But if you want to help out, I would appreciate if you just spread the word. And if you want to do that, just send people to scrollandpodcast.com. That has the different links where they can listen on the different platforms. If they want to contact the show, that information's there. Scrollandpodcast.com. Share that with whoever you want. And I think that concludes the show for now. Thank you very much for listening, and I'll see you next time.